Anthony Griffin tako ingoa, no mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui tēnei rā. So I'm Anthony Griffin, and I'm a lecturer here at AUT in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. And I'd like to welcome you all to this hui here today. So just to begin, I'll get each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So Brendan, if you could start, please.
Sure. Kia ora koutou. My name is Brendan O'Connell, and I'm the interim CEO at Agritech New Zealand. So Agritech New Zealand was established in 2018, and we represent a whole range of organizations, about 160 members who cover major corporates, researchers, practitioners, investors, government groups, anyone with an interest in agritech in New Zealand and pulling that ecosystem together. Looking forward to today's discussion.
Great. And next, Alicia, can you introduce yourself?
All right, kia ora everyone. Hi, my name is Alicia. I'm the Corporate Development Manager at LIC. LIC is a dairy farmer-owned cooperative, and it's the largest ag tech and genetics company in New Zealand. It's focused on the dairy farmer side of things. So what we do is sell genetics. We have an animal recording app, as well as diagnostics and an automation business. This all comes together to provide dairy farmers in New Zealand access to the best technology. So a bit about my role. So I'm at the front end of our commercial pipeline. So I'm looking for new opportunities to bring into LIC and to distribute around to farmers in New Zealand. Part of this is also running the LIC Accelerator Fund, which is an investment fund targeted at investing in early stage companies, so that we encourage and grow innovation in New Zealand. And we also look globally for opportunities. A bit about my background: I've spent 10 years in the dairy industry working for Fonterra, Pamu, and now been over a year at LIC. In that time, it's been a great career. Worked in New York, in Amsterdam for Fonterra, and done a lot of traveling around China, Russia, and most of Europe, commercializing products. I've worked both in the business to consumer end of things, launching dairy products into new markets, and now it's very exciting being on the farmer end, looking for new technologies and seeing how they'll benefit consumers.
Thanks a lot. I just realized I'd forgot to tell everyone who's attending that we are recording. So just so it's clear, we're recording, okay? So I think you guys all know, but just to make sure people out there know that too. Okay, so thanks for that, Alicia. So Gosha, can you be next?
Yeah, sure. So I am originally from Canada, and I moved across the country quite a bit, and eventually ended up on the West Coast in Vancouver. And at that point, I ended up doing all of my degrees, my master's and my PhD at the University of British Columbia, the Animal Welfare Program. And I have dabbled in all sorts of different animals, but focused on dairy cows, goats, and beef cows. And really, most of my work has focused on managing just improvements on farm to try to positively impact animal welfare. I am now, for the last 5 years, I've been at Ag Research, which is the Crown Research Institution in New Zealand, and I'm based at Ruakura in Hamilton, and I'm specifically in the animal welfare team. And I've taken a lot of what I guess I learned overseas, where our systems are basically the opposite to the systems here, often indoors, and so I take that as an opportunity to sort of look into the crystal ball of animal welfare issues of the future, because we basically have them in Canada already. And so now I'm working on a few pretty exciting projects in my role as a scientist at Ag Research. One of them is within 2 different sectors of the dairy industry, and using different technologies to come up with ways of monitoring quality of life better for dairy cows. I'm also doing some work looking at trying to identify animal emotions using technologies. And most recently, I've also been actually branching out of just the farming realm and looking at research animals and trying to improve the life of housed experimental rodents as well.
Thanks a lot. Kurt, it's your turn.
Oh, hello to everyone. Suppose you can hear me?
Yes, yep.
So yeah, I'm the CEO of Palace Ridge, and I've been farming here for the last 12 years now. We're a 1,500 hectare sheep and beef farm. We run about 17,000 stock units. Last year we were the Greater Wellington Farm Environmental Award winners, and I don't know, I suppose we've got a strong focus here on farm with, you know, involving all the people, you know, empowering people, looking after the environment, you know, making profit at the end of the day, and creating a brand, and trying to leverage from that, and seek opportunities from that brand recognition. I went to a Smedley Station Cadet Training Farm, which is a 2-year cadetship up in Hawke's Bay, and then from there went to Gore for a couple of years shepherding, and then got my role here on Palliser Ridge, which now I'm an equity partner. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. You know, I'm interested in technology and anything that can make our business more resilient and profitable. Is yeah, the way forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. Robert.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me. I'm Robert Barry. So I was a dairy farmer in Central Hawke's Bay, and then recently moved up to Rotorua to work for Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So working in land management and talking with farmers around nutrient limits on farm, going to Lake Rotorua in particular. And then in my spare time, I suppose, or in my volunteer time, and why I got invited along today is because I'm an elected board member for New Zealand Young Farmers. So we're a not-for-profit organisation with 1,300 members and about 70 odd clubs across the country. And then we've got sort of school engagement arm as well, and with teen ag and agri clubs at high school and primary school age, and the Young Farmer of the Year competition on the side. So a few people hopefully have heard of Young Farmers, or at least the competition. Recently got elected chair of the competition subcommittee, so it sits underneath the full board and a separate sort of governance arm, I suppose. And I thought I'd talk about that a little bit this afternoon. So, and I guess that ties into the question that we've got asked here around challenges to New Zealand farmers. So they're pretty multiple challenges, and they're pretty complex, and they kind of overlap. And I think there's sort of two words that kind of summarize it in my head, and that's resource management. So everything from environmental resources and natural resources through to human resources and technology and time resource, and how we manage them on farm. And yeah, they overlap quite heavily and align, I guess, into our 4 strainers that we've got for our Young Farmer of the Year contest. So we've got awards now for these 4. So I'll go through them quickly. So the environment, people, food, innovation, and technology. And so those 4 strainers kind of cover most things on farm in a holistic kind of business concept. And so the environmental with climate, water, air, and land. So there's multiple issues there, I suppose, that farmers are facing and needing to address. And then people around culture, health and safety, wellness, human resources on farm, around hiring and firing people, and succession planning on farm. Food, so around safety, markets, trends, security, and animal health and wellness. And then innovation and technology, I suppose, is part of the answer, and it's been happening since the turn of time, really, and especially when the first tangata whenua first came to New Zealand. They had to adapt their farming approaches to grow kumara down here, and they couldn't bring other plants with them, so they had to find new ways of farming. And then New Zealanders have been really well renowned for their innovative approaches with sort of inventing the electric fence, which changed farming systems, and techno-block and all these sort of different farming approaches, I suppose. And then that technology is going to help into the future, and that's going to be the key to a lot of these other things. And I guess the key thing that excites me is the robotic side of it. But from personal experience, dust and durability, I should say, is the key thing, and dust in particular on farms needs to be taken into account, because a lot of things are dying not from, they're waterproof, but they're not dust proof, and then dust gets in there and just screws up the little solenoid, and then it's really expensive to fix. And then when the automation starts failing, then the farmers start losing trust in it and disengaging with those technologies. So anyway, that's a bit of a spiel from me. Hope that's given you something to think about in the meantime.
Great, thanks. And last but definitely not least, Shane, can you give us a brief intro?
Yeah, hi. So I work for Callahan Innovation. We're a government agency. We're New Zealand's innovation agency. And so we try to help New Zealand tech businesses grow and thrive. Specifically, I work in agri-tech. And so I work with small and large early stage and mature agri-tech companies, helping them to do R&D. My background is tech and specifically software embedded systems. And prior to this, I guess I worked for a New Zealand agri-tech company called TrueTest for about 12 years, developing tech for New Zealand and for international markets. And prior to that, it was just plain old tech, not agri-tech. That's me.
Okay, great. So let's get into some of the topics so I guess the first question we wanted to maybe look at was, what are some of the challenges to New Zealand farmers at the moment? You know, we'll talk a bit further in the future, later on this talk about maybe things in the coming years, but what are some of the things that are actually happening to farmers at the moment? And before I continue, can I just say to all the participants or the attendees that you're welcome to post questions in the chat, and then later on near the end we'll put some of those questions to the panel, okay? And Karen will help to collate them with me. So yeah, does someone want to talk about some of the challenges to farmers at the moment? Ones that I guess are related to technology, or maybe where you think technology might be able to help some of that, but just general challenges at the moment.
I can pitch off first if you want there, Anthony.
Yeah, great.
I think you know, labor costs increasing. You know, as a percentage of the income that we're earning is definitely creeping up there. And then so I suppose you know, how do we sort of combat that with technology to try and simplify the amount of labor used on farm? You know, because all the costs are going up, but then the products are sort of not going up with it at the same rate. So that's what we've just really got to keep an eye on. And you know, with the labor shortage, is, you know, not as many people wanting to go out there farming or shepherding is a bit of an issue. And finding on the institutes that want to train these guys as well. We just had Taratahi closed down. Yeah, that's one sort of thing we're battling with a little bit. Another one's just the regulations of you know, trying to keep stock out of waterways and looking after the land as good as we can, and just sort of all the paperwork going in behind it that we need to keep up with. Yeah, that's just a couple of things from me, but I'm sure Robert will be able to flow on from there.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it ties into that resource management, but I put in my intro there. Admin as well, I guess, is really tough out on farm with it being wet and rainy and windy and whatnot. It's quite hard to capture a lot of this, and so I think a technology that could really help there is around that sort of durable iPad with a big case on it, and being able to have different maps and layers on it, and being able to record and share that with your farm staff would be really helpful, and help capture a lot of that data and share it with the regulators and with your farm owners or farm staff. Yeah.
Another thing I'd add on onto the labour challenge is succession planning as well, because I guess New Zealand as a whole, generally a lot of farmer-owned farms, and might be 3 or 4 generations in, and the latest generation isn't as interested in working on farm. So who's going to take over that, and what's it going to look like in the future?
Yeah, that's definitely an issue.
Especially compared to countries like the States, where they've largely moved into corporate models for farming, and it's quite different here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
I think it's good that New Zealand hasn't moved necessarily towards the big corporate farming, because I was going to say, I think probably one of a key issue that farmers are facing more and more, and it tends to crop up sort of in a negative way, but I think there's an opportunity to prevent it, which we can talk about later in the future discussions. But I think is animal welfare concerns, and I think in general they tend to come up whenever there's some big issue like mud in the South Island, dairy cows standing in mud, or bobby calves, or really lame cows, or really thin cows. Those types of things I think are definitely probably something that if isn't on the radar, probably should be on the radar. But
I think I don't think farming's ever been a certain business to run, but at the moment, uncertainty is probably a big thing, and that comes from multiple places. I think not least of which is what potentially COVID will do to markets, potentially. Obviously, it's been mentioned already. Labor pool that might change quite a bit, and it's been happening for a while, but it might change or accelerate. Changing consumer needs and expectations as well, I think, and that probably gets to some of the things that have been mentioned in terms of environmental awareness of consumers and animal welfare, obviously, and the old chestnut of sustainability, and potentially even traceability of food. Those things may all work in our favor in New Zealand, or not. Who knows, really, I guess.
Yeah, and I think just playing off that, I think there is a really big need for from the consumer and from the public in general to have assurances about where their food is coming from, how it's being produced, and then not only that, but they want to know, that it's sustainable, animal welfare friendly, that sort of thing. But they also want to be able to trust the information that they're getting that information from. I suppose if that makes sense, sort of the transparency behind it, which I think tech can really help with.
Of course.
I think it's worth noting as well that all of these challenges that we're identifying, if we sort of look at them across the labour challenges, the consumer preferences and expectations, and what that means for practices on farm and animal welfare and environmental concerns, and these are common across the globe as well, of course. So these are challenges that all farmers are facing, and we're probably pretty lucky in New Zealand with the position we have from our farming systems and our farming capability. That maybe, and you sort of allude to it, Garcia, I presume, in terms of those other farming systems overseas that have gone, quite industrial. So we're coming off a good base, but there are real challenges, as Kurt relays there. Maybe comparing ourselves to overseas isn't the best thing to do. Probably one of the more useful things to do is comparing how things are improving this year on last year and on previous years. But yeah, these are definitely common challenges internationally, which means if we can nut them and solve them, that's good for our producers here, but also gives us opportunity to influence things overseas around things like technology exports, and what problems we might be able to, if we solve them here, what we could solve overseas as well.
Yeah.
Another a challenge that I can see happening in the near future is the loss of production through, the less nitrogen that's going to be used, and the fencing off of the waterways. There's going to be a real and importing of feed there's going to be a real production decrease, or maybe a short-term production decrease, because farmers won't be able to just turn the tap on and pour more nutrient on to feed stocks, and they're going to have to think more of a holistic way of trying to feed stock, so the stock numbers will be down, the production, the milk production will be down. So that's short term.
You're sort of meaning in terms of the stock density, right? Would have to go down a bit. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, just say on a dairy farm, if they normally run 3 cows to the hectare, and they can use so much nitrogen and irrigate and whatever. And then now with these new rules and regulations coming in, they can't put as much nitrogen on.
Yeah.
So then they can't run as many cows. So, if I don't know, it probably is an economic look at it. There's going to be less money coming out of those farms for the greater community. Yeah.
That really amplifies the discussions around if there is going to be a loss of production, as you call it. Kurt is just continuing to try and find ways of getting better value out of what production is there, which is the real drive of industry here. And there are some examples. It's not a quick process to make that switch from a volume play to a value play, but there are definitely opportunities for New Zealand in that space that are that we're well set for. Just need to try and make it reality on the ground for farmers.
Yeah, well, hopefully going with what Gosha was saying, that if consumers are more interested in getting food whose provenance or whose history they can track, then hopefully that could be a slight premium. And so if your farm is is super sustainable and has good history of the animals, then perhaps you can charge a bit more, and that offsets the slightly lowered production cost. I don't know.
Yeah, it's about, I think, also being creative and being open to having a different niche markets. Like it's the market might not be obvious right now, but I think I was having a conversation the other day with somebody about the fact that Jersey bobby calves don't they don't fetch anything in terms of there's not a market for them because they have extremely yellow fat. And
right.
We started talking, it's overseas a big selling feature is actually yellow fat because it says grass-fed beef. So it doesn't seem like an obvious thing. It's right now what's considered to be potentially a waste product of an industry could actually be a huge market.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I guess, look, that almost gets to who we're cooking food for, because we are looking for high value food production, because globally, so food demand is rising through population growth, and actually there will be a demand for much higher volumes of low cost food. We don't necessarily want to be in that game here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think Ian Proudfoot and the team at KPMG have summarised that really well. It says we're population of 5 million, we can feed 40 million, but really what we have the real potential of doing is feeding 5% of the diet of 800 million people, and that 5% of those 800 million you'd hope would be discerning people who have the discretion to value good animal welfare, good environmental background, and the type of quality food that New Zealand is able to produce. So the volume game, much as it has been a big part of our history, and it's still part of what's paying the bills currently, transitioning more and more towards that value play, that 5% of the diet of 800 million people globally is a great aspiration for New Zealand food production and the technologies that can help do it.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll move to the next question then. So let me find it. So that's some of the really kind of near future or the current challenges, let's say. What about some possible ones? I guess we've touched on some of these ones but are there some other challenges you guys see that might be further out than that, like maybe within 3 to 5 years kind of horizons?
A couple that I've seen are firstly the alternative protein space and how that's going to affect the livestock industry globally. I think there is an appetite both from like flexitarians and vegans, but then also from people wanting a cheaper protein source in developing countries. And you can tell from the latest IPO listings of these companies that there's a lot of appetite globally for this to win. So I don't think it's really a question of if it's going to happen. It's just when and how far away that is, and how quick New Zealand can be to adapt in that space. Another thing that I've noticed as well is moving into more real-time information, whereas previously a farmer may have gotten something once every quarter in terms of a particular piece of information, but it now being available instantly when he wants it, and I think that's in the 2 to 5 year time frame, and in some spaces it's already started happening. So you'll then end up in a position where you've got all the information you need at your fingertips, and it's not just giving you the data, but it's telling you what to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some sort of interpretation of that data as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Does someone else want to jump in?
Yeah, obviously I'm probably always going to come back to the animal welfare side of things, but I think that literally, honestly, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think there is going to be a major need to be able to assess animal quality of life. And I was saying earlier about, it's currently, and it's not just New Zealand, it's everywhere, but currently there's a very sort of reactive, whenever there's a welfare issue, there's a reaction to try to solve that welfare issue. But I think we have an opportunity here to be developing measurements and developing tech that can help us with those measurements to show positive qualities of life that New Zealand animals have in the systems that they're in. And I see that as becoming more and more important going forward.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a few international examples of tech companies that have raised and the happy cow is their goal with that in mind, I think. And I mean, literally everybody it kind of smiles, but and I'm no expert here, but it's productivity, but it's also consumer demand. And you can see it on a farm, right? The farmers here will know. Well-treated, happy livestock do considerably better than the opposite.
That's right. I was just reading sorry to interrupt. Just reading an article the other day about pork farms in China, and these are farms that can have hundreds of thousands of pigs, but they have AI sensors that are detecting as much as they can, and one of their goals is to keep the pigs happy, because that reduces the cortisol, and it reduces because I think otherwise it produces a dark meat that's not so good. Yeah. So it's not just a kind of idea of that we want to feel good about the way the animals have lived, but also there is a distinct change in the taste and the quality of the meat that comes out. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no. All I was going to say is that word is kind of the bane of my existence, because everyone wants to know, are my cows happy? Are my sheep happy? Are my kids happy? And I think that's the challenge that I was trying to point out, is that we all accept the fact that consumers are going in that direction. It's always that way. Animal welfare things always sort of go to the way of the consumer. We like it or not, it does happen. But it's having the ability to measure that. So it's not just the absence of, let's say, stress, which is what you were pointing out, and it's also knowing what happy means. And what happy means might actually be a very different thing to what you and I would think happy means. And so it's coming up with those measurements, but also specifically species specific measurements that we can tell, right? Let's say those of us at home that have a dog will say, oh, when my dog wags its tail, it's happy. I can tell you that a goat will wag its tail for 15 different reasons, and not all of those are because it's happy.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about creating those measurements first, So then we can actually then be in a position where we have this toolbox available to say to consumers, yes, these animals are, good do have good quality of life, which is not.
Yeah, I guess because what I've found to date internationally is that it's currently the brands and the processors that are creating their own standard of what this means, and a lot of the time it's not, there's no substantiation behind it. I don't know how much of that consumers actually need. Obviously the more the better, but to just say that this is a happy cow, and then there've been quite a few scandals as well saying that that's not actually the case.
That comes back to what Gosha mentioned earlier, that consumers get this information, but then they need to be able to trust it as well, right?
Correct.
Like, yeah.
So just picking up the same sort of wellness chat and thinking about it in terms of and people and our farmers out there on the farm. We're talking about productivity of animals. I mean, it's the same when we're talking about humans. And I think there's a real issue at the moment around farmer mental health and wellness, or people's mental health and wellness in general. And using that same thought, there's an issue there that if you've got no hope for the future, then you're not going to be able to create these brands and find these markets and get out there and do the mahi to actually get our product to that higher value point. And I think that's a key issue that we've got here in New Zealand at the moment, in particular in our rural communities, is a real disconnect and lack of hope. Yeah.
Well, you're right. If the people are happier, they're more likely to be able to make the animals happier.
For sure.
How can you see technology helping with that, though? Or can you see some?
Yeah, relieved workload, better connectivity, better reliability of information, and being able to predict the weather better, and kind of link into farming directly. I mean, Kurt, I don't know if you've got any thoughts there on how to improve mental wellness on farm. I know you're in quite a remote spot.
Yeah, just definitely getting off farm it helps you out a bit. But as you were talking, I was just sort of thinking that when you were talking about connecting with other people, I think a lot of what's happening in the agriculture industry at the moment is that farmers are getting negative vibe off other farmers.
Oh, right.
And thinking that that everyone's against them, but it's not actually like that, or I don't believe it's like that. It's more farmers just feeding each other with negative thoughts rather than it actually coming from urban people or government feeding them negative thoughts. It's actually just coming from other farmers. But whether they're picking that up through, it's a bit like Facebook. If you want to see negative thoughts about farming, somehow it just comes up in your news feed and that's all you see.
Yeah,
and
no, that's right.
And that's what creates some negative vibes going on. If you want to see something about sport or whatever on Facebook, it will just keep showing you sport. That massive data just shows you what you want to see. So, I don't know whether there's some tech around trying not to do that. But,
off social media.
It does seem to be quite an issue around echo chambers within social media and things, just feeding back what you're already feeling or thinking, which makes you think that that's what's happening when it's definitely not the case. So.
Kurt,
a bit wider than farming, though.
Kurt, are the negative interactions that you're describing, is that from social media in particular, or is it like that you feel that it's actually happening, farmer to farmer contact?
Oh, it's actually in a lot of farmer content. Like if you read the Farmers Weekly, you get pretty negative after you've read it. I've actually just sort of stopped reading it in a way, like just negative thoughts of negative stuff in there. Whereas if you listen to a politician, they're not out to get us. Like everyone's trying to make New Zealand the best place it can possibly be, and politicians aren't trying to, or anyone's trying to have a go against us or make our life more complicated or worse off. They're there to help us, and there's just this big negative vibe around that. that it's all negative. Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, like all the, because the farmers will read the Farmers Weekly, which is, their own information in a way, feeding back to themselves. Yeah.
Should send
They've
a
got their
link
own
to
echo
this
chamber.
conversation to Farmers Weekly.
That's an action for all of us. Go out
Yeah.
and write one positive.
Yeah, I certainly.
I did hear of a.
Go ahead.
So I did hear of a group in Australia that have just started. Effectively, it's their own social network. It's called Yacker. They've tried to identify it as, or they try to gear it so it suits the practicalities of what it means to be working on farm, where often you're quite busy and so you don't really necessarily have time to be typing in messages. So they make a lot of it sort of recorded and voice control. And just try and create opportunities both for sharing knowledge and insights, as well as, I guess, making social connection to hopefully sort of, share the burden or get insights or whatever the need might be. But I guess it's interesting that they're doing a social network specifically for that, and probably avoiding some of the echo chamber type context that you might see coming off Facebook or Twitter or the other channels.
I guess, I mean, maybe we're underplaying it a little bit and we can trivialize it to some extent, but there is a rural-urban divide in New Zealand that's quite noticeable, and has been commented on by some international people, that it's not as noticeable in other parts of the world. And I don't really know what drives that. Certainly social media does a little bit, and maybe the rural press to some extent. Quite strange given our heritage of everyone being not more than one step away from a farm, and from Ireland that's more or less the case as well. So yeah, I wouldn't underplay it, because it is real, and it does have an effect on mental health, but also on driving labor into farming and all of those things, and the what people think of the environmental story, and what farmers are doing, and what's actually real, rather than just what's on social.
4 months ago, I moved from the country to the town, and before that, I thought, yeah, there's definitely a rural divide, and really felt victimized, I suppose. And now I realize people don't even really blink their eyes in town when you say I was dairy farming or something, So
yeah,
now that I'm living in town, I feel it even less. So
okay, interesting.
I kind of question that, and wonder, if it is just that media, and they publicize that story, and then Farmers Weekly picks it up and shares it around, and it gets heaps of clicks, and then they're like, okay, this is something that we can keep floating, right? So it's a tough one, but there definitely is some disconnect there between the consumer and what's happening on farm.
And maybe that's it more than anything else, actually.
It's the perception of it. I can say for sure that I would say on a weekly basis I'll be listening to one of the top radio stations, The Edge or whatever, here in New Zealand, and driving down the road, and you'll hear an advertisement for, do you have lame cows? Give us a call, we can help you with that. Guarantee you, I would never hear that commercial in Canada. on a pop radio station, no way. But I think there is a big component to it, that it is perception as well. And I think it's how much we how much we choose to say, yeah, that's an issue, and then say, what can we do about it? Right? Like that's probably the most important thing. If it's perceived or if it exists, I think the most important thing is to actually try to get, as much as we can, try to surpass or overcome that divide as much as possible.
I would also think that, post-COVID, New Zealand especially sees farming as a very critical part of its economy, and is going to help us get out of this. And investing in agri-tech at this time is even more important. And that's part of why LIC set up its accelerator fund, because we think that that's going to help drive and accelerate the change we need to see in this critical space. But I would definitely hope that that farmers feel the positive energy that we're sending out through that as New Zealand as a whole.
Yeah, well, I guess there's an example there for technology to help break down the barriers a bit, because technology, as we've said, can, you know, set them up in terms of these echo chambers, you know, because everyone wants to eat, right? But we should be more appreciative of where we're getting that food from. And, you know, if we knew more about it, that would also be the other thing, because a lot of people buy food just from supermarkets and they don't know where, you know, the farmers that are making it. So some of that, I guess, having more traceability and more, if there was, you know, like real-time information available from farms for people to see, and traceability, of course, that has a lot of costs associated with it. But they would, that would be, you know, amazing if you could buy buy some beef and see the farm it's come from. You know, how do you guys view how you could possibly track that? I mean, I guess if we were to get super techno, you could have some sort of barcode in the enzymes or the kind of the actual protein of the beef, but that's getting pretty crazy. But aside from that, are there other methods you know about?
What I've seen used are QR codes on the packet that a consumer can scan, and it uses blockchain traceability through the entire supply chain to prove and verify where the product comes from. So I think it's used a lot in beef at the moment, especially when, you know, you're exporting to countries like China where they care about authenticity, and there've been a lot of cases of fraudulent products. So
Yeah.
you can trace it back. So I don't think technology is really a barrier anymore, and this is something that already exists, and New Zealand should get on top of as soon as possible. Otherwise, we fall behind.
Is that technology streamlined to make it efficient for the processes though? Like, I did hear of, you know, that story being told and saying, yeah, this is the future and this is what's happening, but then they sort of shut it off because it was costing too much in their processing plant to actually trace it properly. But it's been a couple of years since I've researched that.
Yeah, it does come down to data standards and the information all fitting together. Brendan may know a little bit more about this, as he's leading a project in this space. But yeah, without the data being standardized and APIs to connect all that information in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess what we need to keep in mind is, you know, these are real needs. We're identifying real needs and the real potential of them. That, you know, they're needed by consumers. There's different value there, and we're still sort of babes in the wood with some of this stuff. So yeah, I'm sure, Kurt, there have been inefficiencies, and there's been you know, early technologies which maybe didn't work fast enough, or challenges with data integrations, like you applied there. And I guess it's you know, there's solutions to those things though as well. It's just part of the evolution and part of the development of those technologies. And I think, you know, there ends up being multiple uses for the technologies as well. When we start talking about animal welfare and how to measure that, I'd be interested to know what Garcia sees happening there, because there's lots of new technology has been used around animals which may not have had the primary purpose, or doesn't have the primary purpose of necessarily measuring welfare, but it would be creating data and creating insights that may enable that to happen. If you're looking at more activity monitors around animals, if you've got, you know, there's calving sensors that do measure, you know, tail motion, not very popular in New Zealand, but available around the world. And maybe those are indicators of animal welfare. There's lots of other technologies around the virtual fencing side of things, where animal movements are recorded, and, you know, when that data becomes more granular, there may be all types of things we can take out of those pieces of information.
Yeah, no, they're actually, I mean, more and more, you know, farmers in New Zealand are using even accelerometer-based, you know, ear tags or leg bands. That is becoming, we've had the challenge up until probably in the last couple of years, we've had the challenge with battery life or having to make a compromise, things on battery life versus storage versus size, right? And so now we're finally getting to the point where all of those things are coming together, and we've got little devices that can actually transmit live, and we could be harvesting that information. We're actually doing some research in that area right now. We're harvesting that information, and what can we get from it, so that information tells us how much activity the cow is doing, how much grazing she's doing, that sort of thing, and we can use that to look for changes. So if we can establish baselines for certain, we know that these cows are usually doing, lying down for 8 hours a day, grazing for 10 hours a day. We can look for changes in that and go, has something gone wrong in that space, and that's why the cows are doing this? Or can we say, actually, these farms are really high up, the cows are able to spend a lot more time lying, so we should be seeing what actually is happening on these farms to maybe highlight them as the people that we can be learning more from, because they're obviously doing the best management. So yeah, I'm completely with you on that. I think there's a lot of tech already available that we don't necessarily have to be recreating the wheel here. We might just be able to harvest the data that's already there and just use it.
And it makes it a lot easier if there's multiple uses for that tech, and or for the data that tech creates, which is
100%.
another reason to really look at what does data interoperability look like, and are there multiple uses of that data for maybe initial management on farm practices, to value chain practices, to animal welfare practices, and any of those varied needs, and they all end up supporting each other, hopefully.
Yeah.
So Gosha, can you be specific about the kind of, I guess, sensors you're talking about? Because you're not talking about cameras there, are you? You're talking about things you actually put on the
Correct.
animals.
Correct. Yeah, there's. I'm not going to throw out any actual names of the products, because I don't want to be touting for specific companies. But there's very small accelerometer based. So it's essentially what's in your smartphone. It can tell. It's got it can tell which way it's pointing. These are the ones that I'm thinking of right now, are yay big. They fit into the ear tag over top of an existing ear tag that the cow already has. And it can monitor essentially what she's doing during the day. That said, one thing that I was, and I'm probably skipping ahead to a next question that we were going to have,
okay.
But one of the things that I will say about this type of tech is that we have to be very careful with how we interpret the data. So on the research side of things, we tend to use the raw data that comes out of them, and then we interpret it ourselves. Most of these devices that are becoming more and more available for the farmer, they've got either real-time processing on the device itself, or it's sending the data and it's being processed at a different location, and then being summarized. And we just have to be careful that what the algorithm is that company has created is actually summarizing the correct information. So that's, yeah, but essentially that's what I was referring to. The accelerometer type stuff, I think that's super simple. It's getting to the point where it can run for months and not be problematic in terms of size and such. But the other option, or the other area that I see becoming, again, because it's becoming easier and easier to put onto animals, is GPS tracking as well. And that, I guess, is relating also to what I think somebody said the other, just a little while ago, about virtual fencing, because it's virtual fencing collars do that essentially. They're using a GPS tracker.
But some of those sensors and devices cost a certain amount of money, right? And I guess they're better for cattle or the bigger, high-value animals.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So I would say, for, again, it depends on what we're trying to get from it. But so from, let's say, the lower value animals, or the animals that tend to be managed as a herd as opposed to individuals, like dairy cows, for instance, there's drone applications. You'd know about that, Anthony. So you can use, drones for tracking and for distribution and that sort of thing. So yeah, I would say, I guess I have tried at length to get some of these big corporations that produce these tags and such for use in dairy cows. I've tried to get them to see that there's value, especially for dairy goats, but I'm still struggling there. So if by chance anyone's listening that wants to talk to me about it, because I think we're going to go more and more when we're trying to think about this when we're thinking about traceability and assurances that can be given. We need to be able to get to the point where we can track individual animals. I think that's actually going to be a mentality shift, and I see a lot of farmers already doing it, but a mentality shift from, yeah, I have a herd of, 10,000 to I've got a group of 10,000 individuals, and I need to be able to actually monitor those individuals. So more and more, we're just going to have to look for that if we put the call out there, the tech will get cheaper. Even when I first started working in this area with the accelerometers that we put on cows, literally we started from, and this was probably more than 15 years ago, we went to a shipping container company, and that's what we ended up using is these little loggers, and they're the crappiest loggers on really. I mean, the tech that we're using we're still using it because they're very easy to use. They haven't been updated for 10 years,
Right.
but it's up to us if we come forward and say we want it smaller, we wanted the batteries that are better, we want to be able to apply these to smaller animals. It's doable. We just have to get the companies on board.
I think I know those loggers you're talking about. But so I think I mean, even in that short kind of 3 to 5 year period, so tech is obviously changing very, very rapidly and converging, and any problem you can think of that you have today with that stuff, battery life, connectivity, data storage, data transfer, you name it, number of sensors, all of that is now solved, if not commercially, technically, and maybe not the right cost or price point yet, and maybe not even with the right problem in mind yet, and so not necessarily solving any useful problem, some of them, and it's quite interesting. I've been guilty of this myself. You create some algorithms with tech around animals, and you've got no animal science background at all, and you're just making shit up, and that's true too, right? And so that's totally the case. But that will change, and things like AI on large data sets of individuals, that won't be a challenge, or isn't a challenge really, except for the market side of it right now. Farming's, Brendan knows this well, it's the oldest or second oldest profession in the world, but it doesn't actually change as quick as tech does. And we talked about all this tech more than, at the same timeline as you're talking about, 10, 15 years ago. But it actually hasn't changed massively in that period. A little bit, but not massively. But I think it will now, and we have started to see it. But it has to be cost effective, and into Robert's comment earlier, it also has to be. Farming is the harshest environment in the world for tech. It has to be useful, and farms are a graveyard of tech. They're literally all over the world. There is just tech out the back of a shed on a farm.
And there's quite a few options doing effectively the same thing. So part of the question is which one of these is actually going to be the winner. I mean, there's collars, there's the GPS tags, there's bolus technology, there's video AI, and we know one of these are going to be the winner. But which one is it?
And they don't talk to each other. Well, sometimes they do. Only if you go to the same company.
This is true.
But
that's changing rapidly as well, to be fair. But yeah, it has been.
We also have, with the issue of all this data coming, let's say we had lots of farms with all these, their animals transmitting data. There's a real issue with data sovereignty or data control there for the farmers, right? Because, initially, particularly, you don't necessarily want your data getting sent off overseas or even somewhere else in New Zealand. You might want to keep it with you and hopefully analyze it yourself. But of course, that's a different skill set to your standard farmers. So how we, protect that and make sure the farmers have, complete control over all that data is very important, right?
I think we also have a certain sense, or we should have a certain sense of sort of social responsibility as well, because talking about what someone just said about the tech sitting, rotting in a graveyard behind everybody's shed, I think, we need to just be aware that we're not saying the next best thing constantly, and having a farmer essentially waste either time, a whole bunch of money towards something that isn't either going to be useful, will not be useful in the long run, or might cause problems actually in the long run. An example of this that might seem like low tech, but is actually, it is low tech, but in the 50s, 40s even, scientists were coming along and saying, hey, pig farmers, we've got your solution. We've got farrowing crates. They're amazing. Piglets won't get crushed anymore. And so, people they invested a lot. They've got farms, like barns, that's what they have in them. And, and as scientists, we were the ones saying that this is the way to go. So people have done that. And then now we're turning around going, oh, oops, yeah, they're actually not very good. They're terrible for animal welfare. We should be getting rid of them. And so for me, that's a social responsibility, I think. That is, the people that are touting these new technologies, we should be thinking about the impact that it has on people long term.
Holistic decision making there, isn't it? You got to take in all aspects, and I suppose that's us, 6 of us here on this panel, because we've all got slightly different takes on everything, and so we're all making a decision for slightly different reasons, but all hopefully able to come up with the same sort of solution.
Yeah.
In some ways, that's just human nature, though, because if you look at things like social media and gene editing, it's like once they exist and once they're out there, it's very difficult to take back and stop that progression.
Yeah, so I think we still have another half hour, or at least a bit more time. You guys are all okay to carry on for a bit more?
About 30 minutes, yeah.
Okay, great. So maybe we just catch up with some of the questions that we've had from people. There was one that, so we're talking about, this consumer-led drive for happy animals. However, of course, that comes with costs. And do you guys have any insights or comments on what's being done to drive premium markets to help increase returns in this idea or this area?
Like I can base it on what I've seen.
Outside of tech a bit.
I can base it on what I've seen overseas, where these type of products have a 20+% premium. There's one in the States, I can't recall what it's called, but it did have a premium on being a happy cow product, and yeah, so there definitely is evidence of that, but it's up to the companies that are branding these to tell that story and use this proof accordingly, because I don't think you could just add these costs onto a farmer without them getting some type of premium or benefit for it, because otherwise it goes back to the point Kurt made, that there's just an increase in costs.
And I don't think.
Sorry, go ahead, Kurt.
Sometimes it's we've got to watch. We don't just think premium all the time as well as farmers, and we need to think more of actually just securing a market. We need happy cows to secure that market, so then we've got we know where our meat and milk is going to go to for the next 2 or 5 years, right, instead of just being a commodity. So so we've got to watch that mindset of, oh man, we must need a premium for everything we do. Hey, if we can just find a home and secure pricing, secure contracts, and then try and take out, that's a huge issue for us as farmers. We've got so many variables, and then the market and the pricing is another one, with weather and everything else that's going on. So if we can try and secure some pricing, through the way that we farm, then we can look at production as something to increase, or we can, if that makes sense.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I don't think all of the markets are necessarily going to be geared at premium, especially based on animal welfare. There's a lot of countries around the world where food security is the most important thing. So it's not, I don't think it's necessary. I hate getting caught up in the fact that, we're talking about it being, using tech just to show that the cows are happy, and that's where the premium is. But I think we can use tech also for, increase, I guess, use the tech as multiple facets as possible. If we can use it from an animal welfare perspective, great. But if we can also use it from a traceability perspective, even better. And so, that can I guess, help solidify the markets that Kurt is talking about, where, especially in Asia and that sort of those types of markets. I'm not going to say that they don't care about animal welfare, but I would say food security is number one. So.
I think, Kurt, you put it right, that the focus is on securing markets at every level, and if there is consumer preferences that can be met within certain contracts, that's great. If you can line up the value in those contracts, which will hopefully be well positioned, that should flow back to farm, or the intent is that would flow back to farm. I know that hasn't always been the case, which I think Alicia was sort of referring to, but that's definitely the ideal. And you're right, it's just focus on how do you secure those markets, secure that audience. How do you put the contracts in place to do that, and how do you really meet those needs?
We had a question way back. Is there a downside of getting the data quickly? I guess all this real-time data streaming, are there downsides to that?
I think there's one, and it's around that social well-being. Like I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix recently, but it's kind of around that ping of information coming into your smartphone, and you can't switch off. And so you're finding out that the fence power dropped at 8 p.m. last night, and you're getting out of bed to go and check it, rather than in the past you would have just c'est la vie and carry on. So I think there's sort of a bit of an issue there around sort of how we get notified from it.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, I guess, obviously we just touched on it, but also these algorithms that can then interpret that data, because if it's streaming in such large volumes, it's too much for some humans to deal with. So we want it to be distilled down, and then, maybe possible courses of action can be suggested to the farmer, who then makes the final decision, hopefully. Yeah. Okay, there's another question about UAVs, which is something close to my heart. So for those of you who don't know, I have a small project where we're trying to count sheep actually from a UAV. But of course, UAVs have been used for other things like herding sheep as well. But do you guys have any comments about just the usage of UAVs or drones on farms?
Yeah, I've tried to use a few drones on dairy farms, and one thing I found was that you had to train the cows to get used to it. They're very scared of it, and it can make them all stampede quite quickly and break quite a bit of stuff, and or create a lot of lameness. And the other one was, we tried to count. We took a photo quite high up of all the cows spread out in the paddock, and then put a grid over it and tried to count them. But we counted most cows twice, because they've also got a shadow. So I had to do it right at lunchtime to try and get the reduce the shadow. And trees, they all go under that. And then the other thing we used it for was just flying over a stream before we fenced it, after we fenced it, and then after we planted it, and trying to use it as kind of a tool to monitor change, I suppose, and be able to tell that story out the other end. And so, really enjoyed that side of it. But I guess it needs to be paired with the ground truthing, right? It's like anything. It's like one angle, and it doesn't really relay.
Yeah.
We had tried using drones for a number of years around pasture measurement, and I don't know if you've heard of LIC's product called Space, but that's been one of our really big successes in the agri space to save farmers time, and it uses satellite technology to calculate how much. So we get like the scans of each farm, but then calculate using data algorithms exactly how much dry matter is on this, so that previously a farm would have to go out manually onto each paddock to calculate this. So I think that's a pretty cool use of technology to solve a specific problem, and one that's been very successful with the high number of farmers who've signed up and kept signing up, and still using that technology.
Anyone else with a good drone story?
This is not a great one, but it's a funny one. Several years ago in Australia, I was on a farm, and the farmer used, well, his son used it actually, used the drone to check the levels of water tanks. Even though he had water tank monitoring tech on there, it just didn't work. And so he ended up just getting his son to fly the drone out to check the level indicator of several water tanks. You know, I mean, that's the most important thing you have on a farm is water. And I just thought it was a funny way around a problem of tech failing, using tech to solve a tech failure.
Yeah.
I think the drone usage for all the videos that they're capturing to help market our products for us is probably the biggest benefit that we've had. You know, we've had some film crews go over the farm for the last couple of months, and you know, everyone's got a drone doing footage, and then that's going, you know, global, and you know, all that awesome
cool
footage, and that's sort of adding to our story and just, you know, creating a better product for us.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point. When I was over at Fonterra doing running conferences under the Fonterra flag, we had these 3D virtual cameras, and we had people sit down, and then they'd fly over New Zealand and be on a virtual farm and be able to walk around and see what everything looked like. It was definitely giving people a good experience and telling that story. They loved it.
Yeah, well, that would tie in well with the QR codes you were talking about before. You know, if you could, from the product you buy, if you could then get a virtual tour of that farm, or, you know, history of the animal's life, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
you know, particularly if you can show it as videos, because that's so it communicates so well with people, you know, rather than words.
And I guess we're mostly talking about tech as it is today, but I mean, as with all tech, it's changing so rapidly. UAVs, I mean, the thing, it's not directly related to ag, but I think it potentially could be. Ring have just launched an indoor drone that, you know, they've got an absurd ad that flies this drone and scares a burglar. But I could actually see some security, potential security on farm usages for UAVs in terms of capturing footage, or alerting, or just, you know, literally just making noise and lighting up an area where you know, or even following stock that have been, you know, when fences are broken, stock theft or loss is still an issue, and you know, doing all that automatically is potential.
Yeah.
There's a lot of activity as well around delivery drones, and so, you know, there are quite a few issues to resolve, but there's a lot of work going on around urban delivery and rural delivery drones. So, you know, sort of payloads of sort of 2.5, maybe 4 kilos, and being able to do direct drops, which could have some interesting implications and uses on farm, in terms of getting parts, getting materials through at different times.
That's right. That's right.
I think you know, drones are here to stay, and have quite an interesting role in New Zealand, of course, because there's some, you know, integrated aviation controls, and probably a good test bed for drone applications.
Yeah, I think that nutrient management is key around that drone use as well, So if we can get drones carrying heavier loads, then we can put fert on with it, and potentially seed as well. So you could do your strip grazing in winter and use the cows to stample to push the seeds in, but you need to put them on, and it's too wet quite often, and so that you could get some oats or something growing behind the cows, and soak up some of that surplus in, and so then you could come back and feed that again in spring, and sort of get multiple cuts out of it, but use a drone to put it on every day, and use the cows to push it in. I think that would help that in loss.
Yeah.
So we have a question too, which is a bit from the other side: is more tech use on the farm inherently good? You know, so are there risks to the image of New Zealand farming? I guess if we get too high tech, then does it start to feel more like a factory-based issue? You know, and do we have, you know, where farmers, I guess this is a long way in the future, or with significant changes, but the farmers having less actual contact with the animals, you know, it's just becoming a product that they're controlling from, you know, with drones and robots.
I think it's definitely worth being aware of that. I don't think technology is either you know, good nor bad, evil nor good. So it really depends how it's being used. And in terms of that less contact with animals, you know, so I guess the proposition there is that technology will mean that farmers have less time with animals. In some circumstances, that might be a very positive thing for the animals, and I'm not even joking about that. Really, I'm thinking about things like the voluntary milking systems, which, you know, if you see them operate, where cows are able to go and be milked pretty much whenever suits them, it is a much calmer environment rather than bringing them all into the shed at a time that happens to suit the workers. Now, that doesn't necessarily suit all farming systems and setups, but it's an interesting animal experience. So, you know, I don't think it's either good nor bad. It's about using it ethically, and I think I'm interested by this conversation. Even when Gossio introduced the sort of the social responsibility, we keep on talking about technology as if it exists in isolation. But you know, technology adoption is a lot more about human behavior change than it is about the evolution of technology or whether it works or not. And so all of these things sort of need to be considered and work together.
Yeah, and Brendan, your example of the AMS, the animal, or the automatic milking systems, there was I think when those first started coming out, there definitely was a concern that that's exactly what they would do, is they would take away the farmer aspect of the animals. But if anything, it again, if it's used wisely, what it's actually done is it's freed up the farmer to do more animal care when it's needed, right? If you're not just trying to get the cows through as quickly as possible through the shed, then you may actually be able to be in a better position to do individual animal care, take the time to periodically watch individuals and spot the ones that need treatment and that sort of thing. So I think it's about using the technology wisely and not saying, okay, right, I got the tech in place, I can go and sit on the couch. I don't think that's the whoever asked the question, I don't think that's the purpose of the tech. I think it's to make things more efficient, but also allow people maybe to feel like maybe less of a worker in a menial position, and make it that, you know, you're able to use the tech to help you make decisions, and so giving you a sense of agency over your work. So maybe improving farming, you know, or different. There was a comment very early on about there being labor shortages. Well, if you can make it that the labor is attractive because you've made it into something more than just, you know, milking cows, then all of a sudden you might get more people actually wanting to be in farming.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. You can imagine if you had, just as an example, like someone who was a drone operator or something, and that was their job on a farm, was just to, you know, go around. That's a different labor market you're getting into there, and it's a whole different appeal. Or even if that was just part of the job, you know, there's kind of you might be able to appeal to more of the city kids, you know, to come out. Yeah.
I'd be able to operate them from anywhere.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. Yeah.
A video game in the middle of your day.
Yeah.
On the farm.
So there's another question here too. Are there can you think of new ways we might find or might come about to measure benefits from environmental work? You know, like say we do things to improve the environment, how can we then measure that the output of these things?
Yeah, so I suppose that's part of that data, and we've got a big team here within the regional council that are collecting this environmental data, and that's still quite expensive to capture. And so we can put in-stream loggers in and be able to tell the water temperature and the N and P content within the water, as well as clarity and a bunch of other metrics. And so if technology becomes cheaper, or it will in time, then we can be getting more real-time data from smaller streams, and we don't have to have just the 24 NES sites across the catchment or whatever it is. We can have people with them above and below their farm boundary if they so wish, you know. So I think that'll improve with time with technology and with data collection. And then the other one would be around that using sort of drones or photo points and being able to store photos easily and cheaply, so that that we've got like a record of change in time, because a picture tells 1,000 words, right? So
yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think that would really help to break down the, you know, this perceived barrier perhaps between city folk and rural folk, if you know, there was kind of evidence and proof of lots of farms doing great jobs, and you know, or their impact on the environment is only this much, and there's other things that is causing issues as well. You know, just to quantify some of these things would be good as well.
I think one of those measures as well is, like, we look at water quality, but that's sort of downstream, whereas we need to get some more data behind soil, and you know, is our soil getting deeper and storing more water and more nutrients and getting richer? And if it is, then we can help dilute what's going into the water downstream, if that makes sense. So let's do some more monitoring on the soil to even get, you know, before we even get to the water, in a way.
Yeah.
Because if we get the soil right, then that'll flow through to the water.
And then on the other side again is the trees, and then it's the carbon credits. And at the moment they've got to be a hectare in size and 30 meters wide, and that's so that they can count how many trees are in there in that patch. And I heard someone say, "Oh, well, we can't count individual trees," and I'm like, "Well, we're counting individual cows, and with 9,500, and I'm like, we count them once a month or whatever it is, and we know how many cows we've got."
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Trees
So
don't move. Yeah.
it's quite easy from GIS data to go, "Oh, well, someone's cut down that tree and someone's planted a new tree over here." So, you know, surely we can calculate that better. And I know Beef and Lambs just released a big thing around, I think it was, most farms are 70% carbon neutral, so they're only just off carbon neutrality, I suppose, is what I think I read out of it. But yeah, it's actually been able to tell that story and say, look, we are almost carbon neutral.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Sounds like it just needs to be a bit better PR.
Yeah,
sure.
Marketing.
Yeah.
So here's one for the farmers, or for one of the farmers. What percentage of farmers today are taking tech seriously and feel comfortable using tech? You know, and I mean, one of that is having support to use it, because it's all very well getting a new piece of technology, but then how do you, you know, how can you use it or learn how to use it, and what kind of, I mean, I guess it's just your impression of how happy are they to adapt or adopt these kind of things on their farms?
I'd say every farmer's using tech in some shape or form.
Sure.
And the decision to use that tech is just a, you know, feasibility. You know, is this going to save me money or make me money or improve our land? And if they can see that, then they'll head towards that tech. I suppose, on it, you know, as a farmer, there's probably three main things that really drives profitability for us, and that's sort of fencing. You know, what we spend on is fencing, water, and then soil biology. You know, improving the soil biology. So any tech that helps those sort of three things, then we know we're going to get probably a return. But what do you think, Rob?
I suppose labour's the other one, right? So they have a big cost on farmers is their labour. So, yeah, I think it's probably common with most things. There's a bit of a bell curve, and at one end you've got the sort of early adapters and the change makers and innovators, and then you've got the early majority, and then the late majority, and then the laggards. And I know there's still some in this sort of laggard space. And met some farmers the other day that I tried to email something to, and they said, no, you got to post it to me. And I was like, what? So that still exists and is alive and well. And so I think the majority are really on board, and then we're starting to get to that late majority now, using things like the Fonterra Farm Source app to check when the milk tankers come in and what their collection was, rather than relying on that sort of paper docket format. And I know that my uncle, who I don't think is overly tech savvy, but he's got halters on his cows, and he's using all that sort of data now, which is awesome, you know, like mid 50s,
Wow.
nearing 60s, and he's got all that going on his farm, and he can, you know, tell what's happening. So
Cool.
it's definitely getting what's the rapid increase.
Yeah.
And it's definitely probably stronger in that dairy industry, isn't it? Like you can actually see the results, you know,
Yeah, for sure,
a lot sooner.
And more things to account for, I suppose. And you got to be milking your cows twice a day, so there's heaps more tasks on farm as well, potentially.
Okay, so I think we'll just ask this last question from the chat, and that's about what is the one feature you would want? This is for farmers, but I guess anyone can answer this. The one feature you'd want today on your mobile devices to create a better experience for you and your team, either for productivity, well-being, or culture.
We were probably just talking about this one this morning, and you know, we have maybe 25 different mobs on farm, and we need to know which paddock they're all in, and you know, we set up a rotation because they'll be moved. The cattle and the sheep will get moved every second day, and we'd like an app that I don't know, maybe more of a picture map. You know, we can move this mob across to another paddock, and then in 2 days' time, it's going to show up on our calendar saying you need to shift this mob and this mob and this mob today, sort of thing. There probably is something like that out there already. I'm not too sure, but yeah, something to streamline that for us would be cool.
Yeah.
Mine would lead straight off the back of that. So it would be a mapping device of some description that, you know, you could have different layers on. You can turn them on and off, and it's got fence ways of have you put in, and where you need to break feed a certain paddock, and be able to tell where people are on the farm as well, so that as an accident or you see the cows breaking over the far side of the farm, and you can then go, hey Henry, you're over that side, can you jump on your quad and go and you know, get them back in. And so some form of sort of farm environment planning built into it as well, within sort of different layers within GIS and updated regularly. So you can have, you know, LIC space in there as well, and you can see the pasture cover and all of those things stacked on top of each other, so that it's really easy to see and easy to turn on and off layers.
That's good. Good you mentioned it, because it's something I'm working on.
Yes.
The one thing with this tech is that farmers are really, I know for us, we're quite scared to invest into that tech, and then in a year's time, there's something that's beat it, and you want to go and, you know, it might be the same sort of setup, but it's a different company, and then you get, you know, you keep jumping along, which gets frustrating in that tech side. So yeah.
So Kurt, I guess an app that would be able to integrate with all the different tech that you've bought across the years would be ideal.
Yes. Yes.
I thought you were going to ask for an app that was able to spoof Facebook in a way that didn't put you into an echo chamber and gave you a more balanced view of the world.
Isn't that called Twitter? No, definitely not.
I don't think so.
So maybe just to wrap things up, could we maybe go around the panel and everyone just talk about some emerging farming technologies that you're excited about, if there are any. If there aren't any, you can say that too, of course. But Shane, do you want to kick it off this time?
Yeah. So we've concentrated a lot on animal here. I guess that's given who we've got in the panel.
Yeah.
But in agri-tech, I'm really excited about robotics and automation in a slightly different ag. So in hort and the opportunities there, not just in New Zealand, but for New Zealand companies offshore, I think. So that's probably where I'm quite excited.
Okay. Does someone else want to go, or shall I call on?
I feel spoiled for choice, I must admit, in terms of technologies that are out there. I mean, I agree 100% with Shane that, look at what's happening around automation and sensing in horticulture. Some really exciting applications coming out, and Robotics Plus doing some great work in other companies. I look at companies like Biolumic who come out, who are looking at LED lights on plant growth, and just think that's a great place for New Zealand to be innovating. And then back to our livestock strengths, the virtual fencing work that's going on, I think, as it matures, will have lots of really positive benefits, both for farmers and for farming systems. So the work that Holter are doing, and Agasons, who Gallagher have invested in over in Australia, I think there's going to be really interesting use of those technologies in the coming years.
Can I just put Gosh on the spot here and say, in terms of virtual fencing, do you know if there's been many studies about whether that's, how the animals not feel about it, but how they, how it impacts upon them?
Yeah, I mean, there has been quite a bit of work in that area. I know that there's sort of some early concerns with the ability for the cows to actually learn, and so that's something that we know is that. In a group of 100 cows, there's probably always going to be 2 or 3 that just don't figure things out.
It's like my students.
Sorry?
Like my students. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, or they'll just always do the opposite, or they'll just respond differently to the signals and that sort of thing. So I think generally, I guess, there has been the research to show that, I guess in as a concept and generally as a herd, those types of technologies work. But I would say that there still is more work needed to actually understand how the individual perceives. I would say the biggest issue with those is that it creates a situation of uncertainty for some animals that don't ever figure it out. What does this signal actually mean, and why am I getting punished all the time for it? So,
yeah.
But that said, if I can just say, I would say that's probably just generally, I would say the on-animal devices, I think that's probably the exciting thing for me, even though I've been working with them for ages. I think they're finally coming into their own, in the sense that they're becoming not cumbersome and not burdensome, and we can put them on animals, leave them on animals, they're not going to cause problems, and we can start actually collecting the data and interpreting the data in a way that we can find out more about the way that the animals are spending their lives. And I think that'll be really, really important going forward to determine quality of life.
Great, thank you. So we've got Robert, Kurt, and Alicia yet to answer this question.
I can go next. I quite agree with Brendan. I feel like we're really spoiled for choice, and we're on a bit of a precipice at the moment. I'm excited to see which of these tools farmers decide to progress with. So I agree with the on-animal sensors, but I also think that the video AI technology has a place to play in this, because it would be a lot cheaper than a sensor on any animal. Yeah. I'm seeing quite a bit in the blockchain traceability, and consumers being able to just scan a code and have it traced all the way back. Still trying to figure out how exactly that would work for dairy, because there's only so far you can go. It's a bit more challenging going back to individual animals, but I think there's definitely more that can be done in the space, and more that New Zealand should be doing to ensure that we're not left behind and other people have gone a bit further. I'm excited to see what else LIC can do with the space technology, because it's worked really well on dairy farms, and it's seeing how can we improve the resolution of the imagery and what else we can do with that aerial monitoring, because I think we've only just sort of touched the surface, and there's a lot more to come. And then agree with Robert and Kurt in terms of what layers can we get of all these various data sources to make the information more easy to absorb for farmers, but also see everything in one place and know what's happening on farm, hopefully in a way that's not detrimental to mental health. But a lot of like real-time information when a farmer needs it on his fingertips.
Thank you. Robert or Kurt, you?
Nothing to add, really.
I can jump in. That the virtual fencing would be just a game changer, especially probably not so much with dairy. You know, dairy have got their rotational grazing happening pretty much, you know, very efficient at the moment. But sheep and beef, you know, we could probably double our production if we had virtual fencing over our farms. I think we'd grow twice as much grass. We'd be able to keep stock out of waterways. For example, we've probably got about $4 million worth of permanent fencing on the farm that I manage, and we spend about $50,000 a year just maintaining that. But yeah, that virtual fencing will just be a game changer, and probably more so overseas in the likes of America and where they don't have many fences. Australia, you know, it'll actually be able to regenerate land, soil. It'd just be mind blowing if this technology could work. Yeah, and then personally, just excited about a bit of the work that Ants is doing with counting sheep for us to minimise losses, or just understand where we're, I suppose we've got about a couple $1 million worth of sheep as capital stock, and be able to trace them and know where they all are and how many we've got is quite crucial. It's like a stock take in a way, and as a business we need to know that regularly.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thanks. So Robert, do you have anything to add, or are you?
Not particularly around what technology. I just hope that it's I think the rest of the team there's done a great summary, and I just hope it's built really tough, because blood and grass are some of the most corrosive properties in the world. So obviously there's two things we've got a lot of on farm, and it just destroys steel in particular. And then that dust, I've personally found that with automatic cut removers, and it's just really tiring when you've got, say, a 60 bale rotary and 4 or 5 of the bales don't work, and you've invested in this technology and then it doesn't work, and it's just really frustrating, because it's kind of almost out of the farmer's hands, because it's a little switch, a little solenoid that I don't understand, and I'm going
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, it's bad enough when your computer doesn't work, right? But
yes,
if you've got a system that you spend a lot of money on. Well, thanks everyone. This has been really great, and thanks everyone who's attended online as well. I've particularly really enjoyed it, and I've really appreciated all your guys' input. It's been really great, and hopefully the sum of our individual knowledges has created something slightly bigger than as a group. I mean, I thought we've come together and created something bigger than some of our parts. So, well, let me just give you all a hand for coming. And I guess that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks a lot.
Hi,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.